Have you ever noticed that the person you are right now listening to this is not the same person who will fall asleep tonight? And that person, the sleeper, is not the same one who might star in a bizarre, vivid dream. We seem to exist as a trinity of different selves: the waker, the dreamer, and the sleeper. The waker is engaged with the world, full of plans, thoughts, and sensations. The dreamer lives in a world of its own making, unbound by physics or logic. And the sleeper, the sleeper vanishes into a dark, peaceful void, a state of blissful nothingness where not even a self seems to exist. We cycle through these three identities every single day, yet we rarely stop to ask the most fundamental question: who is the one that experiences all three? Who is the common thread that runs through the alert citizen, the fantastical adventurer, and the silent void? If you are awake, you are not dreaming. If you are in deep sleep, you are not awake. These states are mutually exclusive, like separate rooms in a house. But who is the owner of this house? Who is aware of waking up from that silent sleep? And who remembers the fading fragments of a dream upon waking? There must be a constant witness, a silent awareness that is present through all three states, or else the memory of transitioning from one to another would be impossible. This is the great mystery of our own consciousness, and its exploration leads us to a truth more profound than any story we tell ourselves about who we are. The ancient seers of India, in the profound texts known as the Upanishads, gave this underlying reality a name. They called it Turiya. The word literally means the fourth. But this is where a great misunderstanding can arise. It is not a fourth state that we must achieve, like entering a secret room after visiting the other three. It is not a prize at the end of a long spiritual marathon. To think of it that way is to miss the point entirely. Turiya is not another state of consciousness. It is the very nature of consciousness itself. Imagine your life as a film. The waking state is an intense, high-definition action movie, full of drama, conflict, and sensory overload. The dream state is a surreal fantasy film, painted with the broad strokes of emotion and bizarre imagery. Deep sleep is the intermission, where the projector is off and the screen is dark. We are so utterly absorbed in these movies that we identify completely with the character on screen. We feel their joys, their sorrows, their fears. We believe we are that character. But what about the screen? The screen was present during the action scene. It was present during the fantasy sequence. And it was present, silent, and untouched during the dark intermission. The movie cannot exist without the screen. The screen, however, is completely independent of the movie. It is never burned by the explosions, never stained by the tears, never altered by the plot twists. It is the silent, changeless background on which the entire drama of experience unfolds. Turiya is that screen. You are that screen. The waking world appears on you. The dream world appears on you. The void of deep sleep appears on you. You, the fundamental awareness, are the substratum that makes all experience possible, yet you are never affected by the content of that experience. The entire spiritual quest is not about trying to create a better movie, but about shifting your identification from the character in the film to the screen itself. It's a shift from being the ever-changing experience to the ever-present awareness in which the experience happens. This is not a New Age platitude. It is the central teaching of one of the most powerful and concise philosophical texts ever composed, the Mandukya Upanishad. This short text, just 12 verses long, undertakes the monumental task of defining the undefinable. It approaches Turiya through a brilliant method of negation, a path known as neti-neti, meaning not this, not this. It tells us what Turiya is, by first clearing away everything it is not. The Upanishad states that Turiya is not the consciousness that is turned outward, which is the waking state. It is not the consciousness that is turned inward, which is the dream state. It is not a mass of undifferentiated consciousness, a description of the deep sleep state. It is not simple consciousness, and it is not unconsciousness. It is unseen, beyond any transaction, beyond the grasp of our senses, unthinkable by the mind, and indescribable in words. Why this litany of negations? Because the mind and senses can only objectify things. They can only know something that is separate from them. But Turiya is the very subject, the very light of knowing itself. The eye cannot see itself. The knife cannot cut itself. The consciousness by which you would know Turiya is Turiya. It is not an object of knowledge. It is the very ground of all knowing. After stripping away all possible definitions, the Upanishad gives us three beautiful, positive pointers. It describes this reality as Shantam, supremely peaceful. This is not the peace that comes from the absence of noise, but the inherent peace that exists at the core of being, untouched by the chaos of the world movie. It is Shivam, supremely auspicious and good. It is the ultimate good because it is the reality of everything, the source from which all apparent things arise. And most importantly, it is Advaitam, non-dual. This is the revolutionary heart of the teaching. In the state of Turiya, there is no separation between subject and object, between the one who sees and the thing that is seen. The very idea of a separate me, experiencing a separate world, dissolves into a single, unified, indivisible reality. This is not the union of two things. It is the realization that there was only ever one. A modern master of this philosophy, Swami Sarvapriyananda, puts it beautifully. He says that we make a fundamental mistake. We think we are a person who has experiences. We think, I am having a joyful experience, or I am having a sorrowful experience. But the truth is, you are not the person having the experience. You are the space in which the experience appears and disappears. Joy comes in you. Sorrow comes in you. The waking state comes and goes in you. The dream state comes and goes in you. You, the pure awareness, remain constant and unaffected. This shifts the entire paradigm of spiritual life. The goal is not to attain Turiya. You cannot attain what you already are. The work is not one of addition, but of subtraction. It is a process of unlearning, of systematically removing the layers of false identification. I am not this body. I am not these thoughts. I am not this mind. I am not the waker. I am not the dreamer. This is the path of self-inquiry, or vichara, most famously taught by the great Tamil sage, Ramana Maharshi. His entire teaching was distilled into one powerful question: who am I? When you ask this question, relentlessly, you begin to see that every answer that comes from the mind is an object. I am a man, I am a professional, I am happy, I am sad. These are all things you are aware of. They are content playing on the screen. But who is the one aware of them? As you keep tracing this I thought back to its source, it loses its power. It is like a phantom that cannot bear to be looked at directly. When the I thought, the ego, dissolves, what remains is not a void, but a radiant, silent, ever-present reality. Ramana Maharshi called it the I, the pure, unadulterated self, which is another name for Turiya. You might think this sounds abstract, ancient, and disconnected from our modern lives. But this very principle is now emerging at the forefront of contemporary psychology. In acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, a powerful concept called the observing self, or self as context, is used to help people with anxiety, depression, and trauma. Patients are taught to recognize that they are not their thoughts, not their feelings, not their painful memories. They are encouraged to see themselves as the vast, open sky, and to view their thoughts and emotions as the ever-changing weather. The weather can be stormy, cloudy, or sunny, but the sky is always there, vast, stable, and unharmed. This is a direct psychological application of recognizing oneself as the witness, the saksi. It creates a space of freedom, allowing you to act based on your deeper values, rather than being a puppet of your fleeting mental states. Even in neuroscience, we can see faint echoes of this reality. Dr. Richard Davidson studied the brain activity of long-term Tibetan meditators and found something remarkable. They displayed incredibly high levels of gamma wave activity, which is associated with the integration of information and the very fabric of consciousness. What was fascinating was that this coherent, synchronized brain state was not tied to any specific task. It was their baseline state of being. This could be seen as a neurological signature of a mind that abides in this stable, non-reactive witness consciousness, rather than being constantly thrown around by the mind-wandering circuit, known as the default mode network. The true beauty of this wisdom is its immediate, practical application in daily life. It gives us the power of the sacred pause. Imagine someone insults you. The default reaction is an immediate flare of anger, a defensive response. The body tenses, the mind races. You have become the anger. But with the understanding of the witness, something else is possible. In the tiny gap between the stimulus, the insult, and your programmed response, you can access this silent awareness. You can observe the anger arising. You notice it as a hot sensation in your chest, a tightening in your jaw, a storm of thoughts in your mind. But you recognize that you are not the storm. You are the space in which the storm is happening. In that moment of observation, you are free. You are no longer a slave to your reaction. You can choose to respond with wisdom, with compassion, or with silence. This is the shift from being a puppet to being a master. As we go deeper into this, we encounter an even more radical idea, articulated by the great commentator Gaudapada. He presented a doctrine called Ajatavada, which means the doctrine of no origination. From the ultimate perspective of Turiya, of non-dual reality, he declares that there is no dissolution and no creation. There is no one in bondage, no one who is a spiritual seeker, no one aspiring for liberation, and no one who is ever actually liberated. He says this is the ultimate truth. This can be a shocking statement. Does it mean our suffering isn't real? Does it mean the search for freedom is pointless? Not at all. It means that the entire story of a separate self who gets bound and then seeks freedom is part of the movie, not the reality of the screen. It is like a man who falls asleep and dreams he is a beggar, suffering immensely. He dreams of trying to find wealth and escape his poverty. Then, he wakes up. Was he ever truly a beggar? No. Did he need to achieve the state of being a wealthy man to end his suffering? No. He just needed to wake up from the dream. The moment he woke up, he realized the beggar, the suffering, and the search for wealth were all part of a dream that never actually happened in reality. From the standpoint of Turiya, our entire life as a separate ego, with its struggles and aspirations, is like that dream. The realization of Turiya is the awakening. Let us use one more analogy. Imagine you are a single wave in the vast ocean. You rise up, feel the wind and the sun, and you look around at the millions of other waves. You completely identify with your form. You think, I am this wave. I was born from that storm a few moments ago, and my destiny is to crash upon that shore. You see bigger, more powerful waves and feel small and insignificant. You see gentle, calm waves and feel turbulent and chaotic. Your entire identity is wrapped up in being a wave, and your greatest fear is your death, the moment you dissolve into the shore. A spiritual seeker from this perspective is a wave trying to become a better wave. It tries to become bigger, or calmer, or more beautiful. It might even dream of becoming the entire ocean, a task that seems utterly impossible for a small, temporary wave. Then, a moment of grace, of insight, arrives. The wave realizes its fundamental mistake. It was never just a wave. That was a temporary name and form that the water was taking. Its true, unchanging nature is the entire, boundless ocean. The waking state was a big, crashing wave. The dream state was a strange, swirling eddy. The deep sleep state was the still, dark water in the deepest trenches, but its reality was always the water, the one ocean that appears as all these forms. In that instant of realization, everything changes. The fear of death vanishes. How can the ocean die by crashing on the shore? It is merely changing its form. The jealousy and competition with other waves disappear. They are not other. They are just different expressions of the same ocean. The frantic search for peace ends, because the wave realizes its very substance is peace itself. The wave did not have to become the ocean. It only had to realize that it was, and always had been, the ocean. This realization is Turiya. Now a crucial point must be addressed. A common critique of this non-dual philosophy is that it can lead to apathy and indifference. If it's all just a movie, if suffering is just part of a dream, why should we care about social injustice, poverty, or the pain of others? This is a profound misunderstanding of the teaching. In fact, the realization of Turiya is the ultimate foundation for radical compassion and meaningful action. The core insight, remember, is Advaitam, non-duality. It is the experiential, gut-level understanding that there is only one self, one consciousness, appearing in countless forms. The illusion is the sense of a separate me here and a separate you over there. When someone who has not realized this sees a person suffering, they might feel pity. How sad for them. Pity maintains the separation. But when one who understands this truth sees suffering, the perception is entirely different. They see that the one self, their own self, is appearing in that form and experiencing that pain. The other's suffering is no longer other. It is a disturbance in the single field of consciousness that you are. Therefore, compassion is no longer a moral choice you make. It becomes a spontaneous, natural impulse, like pulling your own hand away from a fire. Helping another is not an act of charity done by a superior person for an inferior one. It is an act of healing the one body of reality. The drive for social justice, for dismantling systems that create suffering, becomes an urgent personal mission. You cannot be truly at peace, Shantam, as long as a part of your own self, manifested as another being, is in agony. This is why the greatest sages and saints, who spoke of this highest truth, were also the greatest humanitarians. They saw their own self in the eyes of the leper, the beggar, the animal, and the king. There was no other to be indifferent to. So where does this leave us? The invitation is simple. It is to begin to notice the screen, to notice the silent, aware space in which your life unfolds. The practice is not complex. It can begin with the breath. It can begin with the small gaps between your thoughts. The great mantra AUM is a map of this entire philosophy. A represents the waking state, U, the dream state, and M, the deep sleep state. But the most important part is the silence that comes after the chant. That silence was there before, A, between A and U, between U and M, and it remains after M. That silence is not an absence. It is a profound, intelligent, peaceful presence. It is Turiya. It is your true nature. You are not the sound, you are the silence. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of consciousness. If this exploration resonated with you, if it sparked a sense of curiosity about the screen on which your own life is playing, please consider subscribing to I Have a Cause. It helps us continue to share these timeless ideas. For our audience who prefers to listen in Tamil, a version of this episode is also available on the channel. May you find the peace that is always already here, in the silent space that you are.